Well, it's me again, sitting here at the lake, Corps Engineers, Table Rock Lake. Very nice lake. Kind of sunny out right now, a little chilly, but anyway, uh, I didn't make a video yesterday. We got to the campground the day before yesterday, and I tripped and fell on my back and all that stuff, and with the motorcycle wreck from breaking my back and my hip and my right leg for the third time. Uh, I hurt my back and I hurt my right leg again, so I sat up all day yesterday with heating pads and watching TV. But I wanted to get out here this morning and tell my stories. And I apologize for looking around. It's just a habit of mine. I see something move, I look. So, and at a campground, that just intensifies. But I was going to jump ahead from time I worked undercover to when they put me in charge of a state drug task force, and where everybody knew who I was. There's no undercover work about it whatsoever. We ran people that got in trouble wanted to lighten their load, jail time, or we had people that we had arrested that was willing to give up their suppliers and stuff like that. So we ran confidential informants. And me and Ronnie, a guy that I had 4 guys working for me, but me and Ronnie was in the sheriff's department one day talking to the sheriff, and Tommy, the chief of police, his office was in the courthouse as well. He come in and he was all upset. The mayor got on to him for having some warrants over a year old and this, that, and other, needed them taken care of, all that. Tommy went down the list of names and see if me and Ronnie knew any of them. And Ronnie recognized this one girl right off the bat. And he said, well, I know her, da-da-da-da. And Tommy's like, I really like to get her picked up. We can't find her anywhere and all this. And Tommy was always a betting man. He wanted to bet goofy stuff, you know. So I told him, I said, it's about noon because we was about ready to go eat lunch. And I told Tommy, I said, look, we'll pick her up by the end of the day, but you're buying lunch, either today or tomorrow, because you know I'm going to get her. And he laughed at me and he said, we've been trying to get this girl. She's wrote so many hot checks and this, that, and other, and on her family. And one of her aunts was upset about it, or her sister, somebody was upset and called the mayor about it. And so I told her I need all the information. Ronnie got all the information, and he and I started to make a few phone calls to some CIs that had worked for us in the past to see if they knew her. And actually one knew her, had her phone number and the whole 9 yards. It was a different phone number than what Tommy had, of course. And she had written right around $3,000, I believe, hot checks on her family. And her family didn't have money like that. So they were pushing to get her arrested. So anyhow, we got the information, called our CI. He gave us the information, said he didn't know where she lived, but this is her phone number. And you got to understand, this was back when flip phones was still there and you were paying for your text and all that. So a lot of our drug people couldn't afford to have text on their phone. They could call somebody, this, that, and other. But he gives us the information, and I said, all right. So I just dialed the number up sitting there in the sheriff's office and said, hey, is this Margie? And she's like, who's calling? And I said, well, this is Chris with whatever the local radio station was at that time, can't remember. I said, we got your name in a drawing for free DirecTV for a year, and I just need to verify some information, and if you want that, or we can give you a subscription to something. And she's like, oh, no, I'll take the DirecTV. So I said, okay, this is the deal. And I said, I'm gonna have a couple guys show up from the radio station. They're gonna have to get your ID and you're going to have to sign some papers, and they'll bring the satellite dish with you, or with them, and they'll install it, and that'll be that. You'll have it for a year for free. She's tickled to death. And a lot of people think this is a really shitty way of doing things, but it's how you got to think and how you got to do in my line of, or used to be my line of work. So me and Ronnie, she lived right there in town, probably, I don't know, half a mile from courthouse, quarter mile, something real close. So we pulled up in the yard in my Yukon and got out, walked up to her door, knocked on the door, and she came to it. And I had a notebook in my hand, and I acted like I was reading from it. I asked her, what her name was, and she said, "Oh, it's Margie." And I said, "Well, first of all, I need to see some identification, and I need you to sign a couple pieces of paper, and I'll have his guy go out and get your dish, and we'll get it installed for you." And she's like, "Okay, I'll be right back." She went and got her purse, and she was really excited. It was kind of a bummer deal, but she was really excited. And as soon as she gave me her driver's license, I looked at it and I stuck it in my back pocket. She asked what the hell is going on, and I told her, "I'm Chris, this is Ronnie. We're from the Drug Task Force and putting you under arrest for hot check laws." And she started boo-hooing and saying how bad I tricked her and all this. And the crazy thing, on the way back to jail, she wanted to know if she still got the DirecTV. So we got back to jail, took her into booking. They were booking her in. I went down to Tommy's office and asked him if he could come down to the sheriff's office, which you got to walk right by the booking department. And he's like, "Yeah." So we walking by there, and I said, "Hey, who is that in there?" And he's like, "I don't know." I said, "That's your girl, Margie, that wrote all the hot checks." "You got to be shitting me. You went and got her in that amount of time?" And of course, I kind of gloated about it and told him, I said, "You owe me and Ronnie a lunch now." He said, "Can I give you the rest of my names and see what you can do?" And we did. We took the names, and over time we gathered up a handful of people. But I know people can think that I always say that I'm smarter than anybody and I have an ego, but I'm not smarter than anybody. I think it's the way I was raised in a small town of 28 people. My high school graduation had 18 people in it. And a lot of times I think I just think differently. And some of my growing up years, I could have gotten in lots of big trouble, but never really got caught. So there's that. I've got a lot of stories about us working at the Drug Task Force instead of working undercover. Another short example is we heard a guy had some marijuana plants that was 10, 12 foot tall, and he had probably 30 or 45 plants. And when I heard the story of 10, 12 foot tall plants, I just kind of blew it off and all that stuff. But we decided to check into it. We drove by his house, and he had a couple old dogs out in his yard, and lived in a trailer house, and drove a truck. So me and Ronnie started doing surveillance on him. We watched him about 2 weeks, and every human has a routine that they do every morning. Like when I get up in the morning, I get dressed, I go to the bathroom, I get dressed, I put my right leg in first, put my left leg in second, get me a cup of coffee. Everybody just has a routine. And if you watch them long enough, you'll figure out their routines. So we'd go by there, and he'd be at work, and I'd feed his dogs some hamburger meat or beef jerky, whatever I had. And so they would get to know us. When they seen us, they wouldn't be barking and raising hell. And then we started figuring out his times of being home, and because he didn't have a regular job. That's my wife sneezing. And so he got his routine figured out. And one day he was at home. We knew he'd be there, so we just drove straight to his house, got out, petted his dogs. Me and Ronnie went and knocked on his door, and he come to the door. We introduced ourselves, said who we were, showed him our badges, and give him a long story about, we know you got these marijuana plants, you know, 10, 12 foot tall, 8 foot. And I said, we've had a camera on your field growing operation for a couple of weeks now. We've got you out there trimming them, watering them, taking care of them, and all this. And he just hung his head. And I told him, I said, well, we got a deal for you. And then he asked what the deal was. And I said, well, I can make things easier on you with the prosecutor if you'll voluntarily take us out and show us instead of sitting here saying, no, I don't have anything when we got you on film, and just make it easier on everybody. And I can get you less jail time than if you don't cooperate. And we didn't have no pictures or nothing on it, it's marijuana plants, anything like that. He agreed, and we put him in handcuffs just for our safety. He agreed to it, put him back in my Yukon, and we drove probably 1.5 miles, 2 miles down this dirt road, and parked and onto a shoulder area where you can pull over, and we walked down this trail. You can see it as a trail, and sure enough, he had 38 marijuana plants, anywhere from 5 foot tall to 12 foot tall. I mean, when we pulled them up, they were hanging out the back end of my Yukon, and we had to break them over and fold them up and get them all in there. And of course, we videotaped everything, and part of the deal was to show that he actually showed us his plants. We'd always take a picture of him in there, and it wasn't the first time we'd done this. So we'd take a picture of him. I'd get to the prosecutor's office and I'd tell him what had happened. And I said I gave him my word that I would make his charges a little less. And my word was my word, and it still is. And the prosecutor said okay. And so we worked out a deal. He got some probation time and all that stuff. And then he became a confidential informant, actually. And about my word, my prosecutor that I worked with, he was on the board of directors, and I had arrested somebody and given my word on helping them out, and totally got shut out. I walked into his office one day after that fact and took my badge off, put it on the desk, pulled my gun out, unloaded it, put it on his desk. He was on the phone with somebody. I didn't care. I was taking care of my business. And he's like, well, I got to get off here. And he's like, what the hell is going on, Chris? And I said, well, I give my word to somebody and you didn't back my word up, and I can't work this way. My word's my word. And if it gets out that I screw one person, then my word's not good to anybody. They're not going to help me do my job. So we sat and talked for a while. And it was actually kind of a bluff, but once again, he fell for it. And he made me a promise he would, if I suggested a sentence or anything like that, he would go along with it. And, you know, as long as it wasn't a Class Y felony. But I got my point across. He shook my hand, gave me my badge, my gun back. I went on my merry way. But I had to prove to my prosecutors that I knew what I was doing and that I wanted my word to mean something out in the narcotics community. That, you know, if Chris arrests you and he tells you something, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to be, don't trust that damn Chris. He screw you every chance he gets. So, but there's other things that we done that I thought was kind of clever, and I think a lot of people think it was kind of shitty on my part. But that's just the way it was. And again, I apologize for not making the video yesterday. Like I said, I stove up, broken too many bones in my whole life. So I'm gonna get off of here. If you like it, comment. I always answer comments. I love talking to people. Share it with people that you might think that they find my stories interesting. And like I always say, it's always unfiltered and it's never edited. So y'all have a good day. Like, subscribe. I really like people subscribing. But anyway, I'm going to sign off here. Go enjoy the lake a little bit. Maybe too cold, I don't know. But thanks again. I'll catch you in a day or two.